Welcome to the Spirit Gathering teleconference. Today is May 15th, 2018, and my name is Laura Smith, Reverend Laura Smith. I'm co-leading this call with Reverend Diane Wian, and we are so glad you have joined us. So we are recording this call so that people who couldn't be on the call tonight can listen in. Usually we would kind of suggest that people mute. We're a small group, so it's maybe not so necessary, but you can mute if you feel that would be quieter on the line. So that's *6. All right, so today we're going to meet in an open sharing circle. And this is an opportunity for those of us in the Tzaddi community to come together in fellowship and to kind of have an open discussion and kind of share our journeys, get to know each other a little bit better, and receive support in feedback, in energy work, in prayer, whatever format seems appropriate. And so we'll use the talking stick format. And so just based on the number of us here, we have about, 4 people on the call. So, if we take 10 minutes or so each, that should be great. And less is fine as well. So we can kind of let it flow organically. If it's going, way over whatever, I'll kind of step in as timekeeper just so, everybody has equal amount of time, but I think we'll be fine in that. All right, and so, Diane, is there anything else you'd like to add before we say the invocation and so on? Okay, maybe Diane is muted. So I'll say the invocation and formally open our circle. So let's take a moment now to get settled, to center ourselves, to let go of the events of this day, and begin to enter the deeper sacred space within ourselves. Now, let us imagine that we are joining together, sacred heart to sacred heart, with every other person on this call right now. And we can also bring in those who may be listening at a later time. Now, let us imagine we're joining together in a circle with a light or flame or fire in the center. Imagine a spoke of light coming from the center of the circle to your heart, and for each person on the call tonight or listening in after. Now we are connected, sacred heart to sacred heart. Now let us set our intentions. We listen to one another with compassion and curiosity. We ask for what we need and offer what we can. We deepen our connection with one another and the divine. May this sharing serve us, our communities, and the planet. And so it is. All right, thank you. So, you may have had a chance to look at the invitation, the little blurb that was on the punch bowl invitation, and we just kind of put forth some questions as a kind of talking points. You're welcome to kind of, diverge from that and so on, but we'll start to pass the talking stick, and the kind of questions that are suggested that you might like to, share about. What experiences led you to the Church of Tzaddi? What has your spiritual journey been since? And what would you like support with from the community? And so this will give us a little bit of chance to kind of share our spiritual journeys and get to know each other a little bit better. And so any challenges or kind of spiritual triumphs that you'd like to share, this would be an opportunity to kind of share with the group and get feedback or different perspectives, experiences, and then if you'd like to ask people to hold light or send light to that, we can do that as well. All right, great. So we can go ahead and start. Is there someone who'd like to start off with the talking stick and share? Anyone like to go first?
I can pick up the stick. This is Diane.
All right.
I would say my whole spiritual journey and awakening began. I live in the D.C. area, and many years ago there was this wonderful, both a magazine and also an annual conference. It was a magazine based out of Bethesda, Maryland, which is a suburb of the D.C. area, and it's called Common Boundary. And they had a conference every year that was great, like Angeles Arian, The Fourfold Way, if you know her. And anyway, lots of really wonderful speakers, and it was a great conference for many years in my backyard, and I was grateful for it. So I was always drawn to things that were on the edge a little bit, as far as the spiritual, always seeking. I can remember even as a child, they had comic books that would tell biblical stories, and I felt really drawn to them when I was younger, and I was curious about all that. But at this one of the Common Boundary conferences, I was in a big transition time in my life, leaving a major job that I had had for 12 years and not knowing what was next. And Joan Borisenko spoke. She was a keynote, and she was talking about this. She was on the board. I don't know if she still is, but it was with this man named Bob Hoffman, who had started. Bob Hoffman started a group or a business, and it was based out of California, and they would have training programs and experiential programs, a couple times a year. And so I was in this big transition and didn't know what was next, but I was really intrigued the way she had spoken of this. And so I went to California, and it was probably 4 or 5 days, and it was really wonderful. And it was the first time I ever experienced. I remember one morning I woke up, but I hadn't opened my eyes, but yet I was seeing all this light. And it was really great. And I thought, wow, this is kind of amazing. And it was this awakening. And then through someone in the D.C. area that had, through some connection, started working with Amy or taking Amy's classes with Roselight, and introduced me to her and Light Body, and I took that and Flow, Alignment, and Connection, and a whole bunch of other classes that she taught. I think I took everything from 1994 that she offered to at least 10 years later or more. And so it's really through her, and then her inviting or getting connected to the Church of Tzaddi. That was how I came to know that church, and I really was in that way grateful. She was trying to work on the seminary part and building something so that there could be an invitation for the church to grow and to actually train people. I feel really fortunate that at the time Thomas Ayers, who was a longtime Roselight student too, was a mentor of sorts as I was testing both the healer counselor as well as the minister for this program that Amy was putting together. And I think about those readings, and I think about those exchanges that I had with Thomas by phone, and also the papers that I wrote, and the depth that I got into was quite astonishing. And through some other work, the radiant reflective work, actually, I've and focused on Tzaddi, there's been some pretty powerful connection with founders Amy Keyes and Dorothy Blackmere, and I just like this incredible, and the depth and breadth of their work and what they've started and what Tzaddi is. It's quite profound. So that's my path to Tzaddi.
Great, and there's about 3 minutes left or so. Would you like any feedback or energy transmission?
Yeah, I was just thinking of the next question in terms of what support I could use, or in asking in terms of support for the church. And what would be helpful is if everyone would be willing is just to kind of hold space while I go in and see what arises with those questions.
Right. Sounds great. We can do that.
Yeah.
This is Nancy, and I'll pick up the talking stick.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. We're still in the talking stick of Diane.
Okay.
Just another moment or two, and then we'll formally put the
Someone
stick down.
was using a weed eater outside where I am, and I couldn't hear.
Oh, it's a perfect time. It's interesting just being in the space feels really supportive to me and to the church, and there's nothing that arises as to energizing or intending. It just was a very sweet space, and I was really enjoying feeling all of you and connecting with all of you. And I think that's what that space and time was for. And I'm really grateful for that. And it feels complete, and it feels like the right time to put the stick down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. And whenever you're ready, Nancy, if you'd like to pick up the stick.
Sure. I had not read the questions beforehand, but what comes to me is that I think, like many of us, the spiritual always was calling in childhood and young adulthood. And all along the way, there have been specific times when I felt called into a new chapter or a new type of spirituality. And I remember at one point I was wondering which direction I should go in terms of work, and I had been working as an artist, and before that had co-founded the Waldorf preschool here in Cincinnati. And but I had a feeling that I was supposed to just surrender to something new, and I actually got down on my knees and just was willing to let go of all that I had been doing and being. And soon after that, I asked for guidance, and soon after that, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was standing at night in the desert, and beside me was a tent that was glowing with light, and God or the Spirit dwelled in that tent. And I was told that my job was to stand there in the dark, and when any wanderer or pilgrim or passerby came that way, I was to lift up a corner of the tent so that they could see light shining. And I was really moved by that dream, and it stayed with me all these years. And I feel like there have been different ways that I've been living out that calling since then. And one was going to the Barbara Brennan School for the 4 years, and I remember going to an introductory workshop in Chicago, and at the end of the workshop, I had just loved the workshop, and at that time, Barbara would go around and make comments to certain people during a meditation period, and she made a comment about me and my heart energy, and sort of to stay with that. And at the end of that weekend, I was talking with a bunch of people I had met, and everyone was so excited to be going to the school in the fall and asked me if I was going to go, and I said, well, I'm probably the least likely person to go because I have 5 children and one with special needs, and I work, and I don't think that's probably going to happen. Well, it did happen through an amazing set of circumstances. The money sort of appeared and things worked out. And when I got to Barbara Brennan, there was only one other person that was there in our class from that big group of people. And I think a lot of times on my journey, I will feel a call and also doubt sometimes, how it's going to work out. But somehow I managed to get to that next little stepping stone in the stream. And it was during Barbara Brennan that I heard about Amy and Roselight. And I think, like you, Diane, that is how I got to Tzaddi. I took light body and flow alignment and the teacher training for flow alignment and a number of other classes. And I just really loved that community and just about everything connected with Roselight. And I was doing energy healing. I had gotten a master's in pastoral counseling. After that dream, I was led to a seminary where I thought I would never go back to school over my dead body, but I went for the master's, and it was just an amazing experience. And so I had a counseling practice and then learned the energy healing and put that together. And I needed to get a minister's license. And so even though I was a minister from a different denomination called the Peacemaker School of Spiritual Healing, that didn't work for Ohio, where I lived and live. And so when I found out about Tzaddi, that was the thing that really felt like an answer to a prayer. And let me think. I have been so impressed, and I can't even think of a word I want, so I'll just say, was so impressed when Amy wrote, I guess, the Constitution. If any of you know, if it has a different title, that body of work that she put together was just amazing about Tzaddi, and it covered so many areas that I've been interested in as a counselor and energy healer and just a spiritual pilgrim that I really got a lot out of just even reading that. And at the same time, I was called to a Franciscan parish here in Cincinnati, a peace and justice-oriented Catholic church. And about 20 years ago, our whole family did join the church, mainly that parish. And so I've been interested, as usual, in many different paths. They all connect for me: the Native American spirituality and shamanism, the energy healing, the mysticism that's found in the depths of the church, where there is living water under all the encrustations. And I felt like I've just been placed in very different settings, like many of us, for a reason. And that just continues to happen. I've, in the last couple of years, come back to poetry and, wrote, a book of poems that was published a couple years ago that is very much about my spiritual journey and a lot about nature and just chance happenings on trips and journeys that are synchronistic and, meant to be, and inspired me a lot and some others as well. And right at the moment, I'm feeling mostly called to work quietly with nature, with herbs, and learning a lot about making things with medicinal herbs. And I feel like it's a quieter chapter for me now. And I have pulled back from being active outwardly in groups to honor this time of deepening and quieting.
And thank you. That's the time, so take your time finishing.
So that's pretty much it.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Sally, would you like to pick up the stick next, or I can if you want to wait?
I'll pick it up, and then I'll let you wrap up everything. So, like most people, I seem to have come into Tzaddi through Roselight and the work that Amy was doing with Tzaddi. I joined Roselight with the master's program and had the fortune of being a part of that with so many of the participants who were working towards their ministerial and doing so much service to support the people that were in the masters. So I just found the energy and the community to just be really a beautiful experience, as well as the actual, weekends of teaching. And when I completed that and was looking for what's next, I was looking at the fact that I work with homeopathy and wanted to expand into other domains, and saw myself as being kind of a natural counselor, and had different kind of issues in the fact that I've never been drawn to a specific religion, that the household I grew up in, my father was very antagonistic to the church, and I just couldn't relate to a lot of the established religious organizations. And I really liked and respected Tzaddi because it's interfaith, and because I found that it defined God and spirit in ways that sounded true to me and didn't sound like dogma. And so I spent the time and earned the healer counselor certification and considered going to the ministry, but again, I just didn't feel that spiritual work per se as a minister was my central calling, and that I've been very happy with maintaining the status of a healer counselor and really working more on the levels of counseling and spirituality, and also kind of deepening my understanding of the relationship between spirituality and healing. And in that, I've also spent time looking at the Christian Science religion and how the work of Mary Baker Eddy was very similar to the philosophies of Tzaddi, but in many ways she was able to develop a much richer framework than we seem to have been able to do in Tzaddi. And what would I like? I think for me, it's always been getting more guidance as to what my role and purpose is. And being in North Carolina has been good for me. That New York City was not a place that nurtured me, and it was really hard to have to live there for 30-plus years. And so a lot of times things that I wanted to do, I just literally did not have the energy to do. So now I'm kind of looking at what is it kind of feeds me and how do I feed other organizations and communities, etc. And so I'm kind of looking at where my service lies. I relate to the response I'm getting to be in nature, work with nature. It definitely reminds me of the work that we did with the spirit beings and the golden ball energy. And so I definitely feel that the mountains of Western North Carolina just like wanted this energy to come in and nurture and give back, because I feel like, you know, we humans have done so much in taking away from the Mother Earth, and that anything we can do as stewards is really welcomed and appreciated. So that's something that I've been really kind of, I don't know whether to say working towards, but that's been what's been kind of filling my life in a very natural and joyful way. And I also want to just acknowledge the fact that Tzaddi has given a legitimacy to the work that I do, and that I really appreciate the work that, you know, the founders did to create the church, the work that Amy and other people did to rewrite all of the, you know, bylaws and the ethics and, you know, different foundational structure. And so I really hope that at this point that there's a level that this kind of comes to birth something, because I feel like there's this energy here that's kind of latent, and it would be nice to have more people join the organization and to see it kind of blossom into more than it's been. Because for many years, I just feel like it's been kind of treading water, and I hope that it can move to a different level, so to say. And that's it. I'm complete.
Great, thank you. So I'll pick up the talking sticks. This is Laura. So I have been in a kind of a spiritual crisis for the past year or so, couple of years, and I've shared about it before on various gatherings and calls and things. But I would love your thoughts or experiences about it. So I'll lead up a little bit. I'll just give a little kind of sketch of where I've come from and so on, and then kind of get to that. So the issue is that I've been feeling, I also live in New York City, and I've also I'm very sensitive, so it's not always an easy place to be, but I've been here for almost 30 years now, I guess, and it's in the past, it's always been intense, but kind of along the lines of the sort of earth changes and all that kind of language that a lot of people talk about now. In the past several years, I'd say I've started to really sense a shift in the energy, and what's striking about it to me is that it is really coming from my sensing and my perception, rather than some kind of idea or kind of concept or something like that. Although religions talk about this kind of theme, of course, the evil, good and evil, and so on. But to me, it feels like in the last couple of years things have really accelerated, and the so-called battle between light and dark, this kind of theme seems to, that sounds kind of grandiose, but I've got to say that that's something like that is what I actually sense walking down the street in New York. And so I'm kind of wrestling with, what is it that I'm perceiving? How do I work with this skillfully? And so there's a sense that, there's a kind of a, for lack of a better word, or sort of demonic energy that is around on the street. And, some people kind of seem to embody this, or some of the sort of structures of the city where people are kind of coming in and out of, passageways and, Grand Central Station, or, these kind of commuter gateways. It's almost like a matrix, like the movie portrays, and so I've kind of, I've been trying to tune into my intuition and use my energy skills, but it has been very challenging, and I'm always kind of looking for ways to understand what's going on a little bit better from a mental body perspective, because I think that helps to kind of frame it, helps to deal with it. So by way of background, I say that some of my earliest memories, I would say I've always been a kind of a quote unquote spiritual person. I always had this sense that there was something else to life than just the appearance, of suburban New Jersey where I grew up. And I was always kind of looking for that, what was that, where could I find it? And I kind of explored both kind of Western esoteric traditions and Eastern. As a kind of a teenager, my mom had, tarot cards, and I kind of got into, the Western esoteric tradition a little bit, and then found Tibetan Buddhism. and that really resonated with me and became my path for many years, and ended up going to graduate school and learning the language and kind of really wanting to, spend my life immersed in that world. And long story short, I ran up. Although there were great eternal treasures of spiritual knowledge in that tradition, and I definitely have the benefit of that. I also ran up against a lot of institutional brick walls and kind of old thought forms that were very kind of medieval, very hierarchical, and so on. And as a Western woman, going into India and Tibetan community, there were definitely some glass ceilings there and so on. And so I kind of left that world with a bit of a wounded in various ways. And my path since then has been a kind of a eclectic one. I think a lot of people in this generation kind of have had to forge their own paths as these old systems break down. And so I've been a seeker, but I've been very eclectic and explored a lot of different healing traditions, shamanism, Peruvian work, and work with nature and so on. So my path has been very kind of spiritually oriented, but more eclectic at this point. And so along that journey, I encountered Rose Light and the flow alignment connection work, which was really wonderful and really helped me through a difficult period as I was grappling with all of that. And then kind of at the same time, the Oren and Daben work, and I studied light body and was part of that group for a long time. So that kind of, that brought me to Tzaddi after being kind of a Rose Light person for many years. And, it was a wonderful experience. And so that kind of brings us up to common history. Here we are, the church is kind of, this structure that we've kind of inherited. And so, as Sally kind of mentioned, it's like what's next? It's kind of in our hands, what the next steps are for this form. Okay. But the issue that, I'd love to just have some transmission, and if any of you have any kind of sharings or insights from your own journeys, I would love to hear it. We have about 2.5 minutes left. But just this evil kind of grappling with. I mean, the thing is that in the Buddhist tradition, they don't really talk about a force impeding you from the outside. The focus is really on kind of finding your own consciousness, and there's kind of a mythical mention of the demon Mara, who challenges the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, but that kind of shortened. They don't really elaborate on that aspect of it a lot, although I think there's probably more there that they just chose not to emphasize that. But it's the Western religions and maybe the kind of New Age religions that talk a lot more about a counter force that's actually trying to impede or block or slow people down. And that's actually what I'm perceiving on the street, is a force that's trying to impede, and kind of block. And, God knows there's a lot of things happening in our government and social structures that would also, contribute to that. But I'm kind of, realizing that I have to write my own map in a way. So any comments or insights that you have in the remaining minute and a half would be very welcome, and thank you.
So this is Sally. I'll pick up the stick. What comes up for me, and I used it a lot when dealing in the aftermath of my father's death, and just felt like it was like swimming in a sea of hatred and toxicity, and I I really had never dealt with people like I had to deal with at that time. And I was led to start going into the Christian Science Church and reading the works of Mary Baker Eddy. And the foundation of her belief is that God is all and God is good. And therefore, all is good. And, I have a friend who, is down here with me. She came from New York and also had gotten into it. And it's like no matter what the circumstances, only God, only good. And the way she describes it is the rest is a delusion of the mind, and that the reality is not the corporal body. It is not this scene that we are in on this planet, but the reality is the spiritual existence that is everlasting. And I have found that to be extremely helpful, because most of the time what I'm dealing with are things that are more perceived kind of issues. That's, the fear that something's going to happen, or, what's going on with the government, and, what's this decision going to do? And to basically trust that only good can come from a situation has been extremely comforting, because I think for me it is this conflict of a spiritually based existence and a mental, rational existence, which is how I was brought up, and how the two come into conflict and opposition. How that deals with the perception of actually feeling a darker force or a sense of evil, it is a little bit harder to grapple with. And I know I was going to come to New York recently, and I just had this visceral feeling that my body did not want to go there. And I pulled out my pendulum and I asked if it was in my highest and greatest good, and it was clearly no. And I have not scheduled the trip. So I don't know if this is helpful to you, but this is kind of what I can add.
Right.
So I'm
Thank
putting
you.
down my stick.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful to hear your experience and kind of corroboration. So yes, I will sit with that. And all is good.
And an invitation to visit Asheville. You may want to think of moving.
Oh, yes, it's begun to cross my mind. Great, thank you. All right, so I guess that brings us to the end of our time. Diane, do you want to pick it up for our closing?
Yeah, sure. So let's just take a moment and let this time together settle. And then thank you for that. And to end this, I'd like to share that this call will be archived as an MP3 can be listened to, the playback of this recording can be listened to by dialing 712-432-1085, access code 990-322#. We hope you'll join us for our next Spirit Gathering on Tuesday, June 19th. These calls are hosted by Tzaddi, an interspiritual metaphysical organization founded in California in 1964. Tzaddi welcomes, nurtures, and supports people in celebrating and more directly experiencing their relationship with the loving presence of the divine. Our programs are open to people of any race, color, or national or ethnic origin. Visit tzaddi.org to learn more. We will now close and have a thanks and blessing and a thanks to founders Amy Keyes and Dorothy Blackmere, and thanks to all of you who have been a part of our community tonight, and thanks to the divine who always supports us even when we are not aware of it. As a reminder, there is an additional meeting being launched on Wednesday, June 6th at 8:30 using this same dial-in number called the Circle of Light, which will be hosted by Bishop Topsoil. This will be a time to come together to share something you wish to bring more light to, and to sit together in silence, praying, generating light, and letting that light touch all who wish to and can receive it. And so let's just take another moment of silence and thank and honor ourselves and one another and the beings of light that were here to support us in this sharing this evening. Thank you for your participation and wishing everyone a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
By the way, I just wanted to inquire if any of you all knew Don Van Fleet through your either Barbara Brennan or Roselight time.
Could you say that again?
Did any of you know Don Van Fleet?
Yeah.
Who was the yes?
This is Nancy. Yeah, I took our son John to him for healings several times. Drove into the city on the west side.
Okay, because I just held a memorial transmission for him last Wednesday. He passed away, I believe it was the 1st of May. And so I'm not sure how much that's been circulated through the Barbara Brennan School, but I know that he was a graduate and his sister was teaching there, etc. So I thought that perhaps you might know.
Thank you so much. I had no idea.
Yeah, well, as I say, very recent, very sudden. So, and a big loss. And, you know, I was kind of thinking of it as Laura was talking about this sense of good and evil and what's going on in this time period. So, for whatever reason, his time was to move on to the other planes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So I say good night and wish you all well.
Same to you. Thank you.
Yes,
Yes,
same
thanks.
to you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Good night, all.